There are moments when a car begins sending such strange signals that they feel like silent cries for help. Lights turning on for no reason, sudden loss of power, intermittent failures that appear and disappear as if they had a will of their own. And almost always, when this happens, the first response you receive is an overpriced quote before anyone even opens the hood. The promise is always the same: we need to run the scanner. And so is the price: 300 reis, 500 reis, sometimes more. But the truth behind these diagnoses is different. Behind almost all of these issues lies a set of resets, procedures, and electrical sequences that anyone can perform at home, without special tools, without a scanner, without spending a cent. These are methods shared among experienced technicians, but rarely revealed to the public. Not because they're complex, but because it's not in anyone's interest for you to know them. Today, we're going behind the scenes of this knowledge. We're going to understand why so many cars go haywire over simple errors, how ECUs carry old codes, why sensors send false information, and most importantly, how to restore everything to its original state, as if the vehicle were rolling out of the factory again. Before any technical explanation, one thing needs to be clear: this video is not about miracle tricks, but about real electrical processes used in serious workshops when no one is watching. What you're about to discover completely changes the way you see your car, and how you avoid unnecessary expenses. Imagine the following situation. Your car starts misfiring intermittently. You take it to the shop. The mechanic takes a quick look and says it's a module issue. Before even checking connectors or opening the manual, the diagnosis is already the most expensive part replacement. Yet in many cases, the electronic control unit is perfectly fine. It has simply accumulated electrical residue, old codes, tiny reading glitches. All of this can be removed with a complete reset, carried out through precise procedures you're about to learn. And this is where the first step begins: the correct way to disconnect the battery, something many people believe they know, but almost always do wrong. Disconnecting the battery isn't just about cutting power, it initiates the internal electrical cleaning of the modules. But that only happens when the process is done with order, timing, and care. The simple act of choosing the correct terminal can be the difference between restoring the car or causing a short that can damage parts of the ECU. After this power cut, we move into a stage almost completely unknown to the public: the total draining of electrical residue. Few people realize that even without a battery, the car is still alive. The modules store residual energy in capacitors, and that old energy carries the errors you want to remove. It's impossible to reset the car if that charge remains inside. And there is a simple and surprising way to eliminate it. But this is only the beginning. There's a hidden reset within the ignition system itself, which requires a precise timing of activation even without the battery connected. This detail makes all the difference because it forces the ECU to release any last drop of stored energy. Without this, the next steps don't work. And then we reach the moment the car is reborn. When you reconnect the system under ideal conditions, it relearns its parameters. It's like allowing the vehicle to look at all the sensors again, reread everything around it, and rebuild its operational logic. Idle becomes more stable, fuel consumption improves, failures disappear. But we're only scratching the surface. Because electrical resets are just the start, there's also the physical side of the story, where sensors connect to the ECU through needle-thin wires. If these points are dirty, corroded, or partially loose, everything else becomes compromised. You can have a mechanically perfect car, but if a single connector is oxidized, your modules will receive wrong data all day long. And in many cases, that's exactly where the confusion begins. The car has no defect, the ECU has no defect, but the information reaching it is contaminated. Fixing this costs less than a simple cup of coffee, and it's one of the most closely guarded secrets in the automotive industry. But there's still something bigger, one of the systems most feared by drivers: the electronic immobilizer, capable of preventing the car from starting even when everything else is working. When this system locks, panic follows. But it too has a reset. A procedure that feels almost like a secret sequence, a silent code informing the authentication system that you are indeed the rightful owner. And that leads us to the next part, where all this logic connects to form the complete picture: how each reset directly affects the way the car breathes, accelerates, interprets signals, recognizes commands, and above all, returns to functioning the way it should. The electronic operation of a modern car is like a constant conversation between dozens of sensors. When that conversation fails, the vehicle starts behaving as if it's trying to guess what to do. This is the point where many drivers believe something serious has happened, when in reality the problem is almost always in the interpretation, not the mechanics. After the ECU's initial reset and the clearing of electrical residue, the second major pillar of this process appears: the quality of the signals that reach the module. And that brings us to the connectors which, despite being discrete, are responsible for determining whether the car will run smoothly or show random symptoms that confuse any diagnosis. In a traditional workshop, sensor replacement usually comes before a detailed analysis of the connectors. But a sensor rarely fails on its own. What usually fails first is the path. Dust, moisture, oxidation, and tiny gaps create invisible barriers. And when the module receives interrupted, incomplete, or distorted data, it reacts in the only way it can, by trying to compensate. That's when the idle fluctuates, RPM rises out of nowhere, the car feels weak at low speed, or responds sluggishly to the accelerator. Cleaning each connector is not a luxury, it's the foundation of the car's communication. And the change is often immediate. When the module starts receiving clean data again, it can, for the first time in a long time, understand what's happening around it. It's almost like allowing it to see without fog. From this point on, we enter one of the most sensitive resets, the recalibration of the electronic throttle body. This component, one many people don't even know exists, is directly responsible for controlling how much air enters the engine. It interprets the position of the accelerator pedal and translates that movement into precise throttle opening. If there's even a minimal discrepancy, dirt blocking its full travel, an electrical advance outside the standard range, an incorrect value stored in memory, the car begins to react with sluggishness, hesitation, or mild jerks. Recalibration isn't just a technical procedure, it's a kind of respiratory reboot. When you execute the correct cycle of ignition, pause, and readaptation, the throttle body reorganizes its internal parameters and returns to responding naturally. And this simple process, which takes only a few minutes, replaces expensive services that many shops present as complicated work. But there is an even more critical point in this whole story: the electronic immobilizer system, which can prevent the car from starting even when everything seems to be in perfect order. It was created to protect the vehicle from unauthorized activation, but the big problem is that when a mismatch occurs between the key, the module, and the battery, the system interprets the owner as a stranger. And when that happens, no mechanical maneuver solves it. Replacing parts doesn't help. Trying to start repeatedly doesn't help. The car simply refuses to start. This is when many drivers end up paying a lot for a simple reprogramming. But there is a procedure, unknown to most, that forces the system to recognize the owner again. A sequence of timed steps, key turns, and brief pauses that act as a silent identification protocol. It doesn't bypass any security, it simply restores the original communication. It's impressive how something so simple is so rarely discussed. And then we reach the point that many workshops avoid mentioning: the resets that directly involve the dashboard and the warning systems. The famous warning light tends to stay on even after the issue has been resolved, because the ECU keeps a historical record of previous errors. So far, so good. The problem is that this record can confuse the driver, suggesting that the car still has a defect that no longer exists. There is a precise way to clear this memory without a scanner. A quick sequence on the accelerator pedal combined with ignition mode forces the ECU to reset its internal codes. It's a kind of deep clean, leaving only real errors, if any. The feeling of starting the car and seeing a clean dashboard is almost a confirmation that everything is back in place. And then finally, we reach the last adjustment: the recalibration of the electric steering. A system so sensitive that even minimal variation can make it too heavy or too light. The procedure of turning the steering wheel to its limits is not superstition, it's a direct instruction to the module to redraw its boundaries. After this, steering usually gains smoothness, precision, and a much more natural response. When all of this is completed, the car still goes through one last process, a process that cannot be done while stationary. It needs to relearn the way you drive. The way you accelerate, brake, maintain speed, change lanes. All this information builds the driving profile the module uses to adjust gear shifts, accelerator response, and even fuel consumption. The first few kilometers may feel strange because the car is reorganizing everything internally. But as you drive consistently, it captures your style again and adapts. At the end of this journey, the vehicle not only loses glitches and inconsistencies, it becomes lighter, more aligned, more predictable. And all this without special tools, without expensive diagnostics, without relying on a shop scanner. What we did here wasn't teaching shortcuts, but revealing how the electronic system truly works, and how, with knowledge, you regain the control that seemed lost. Perhaps the most important reflection after all of this is this: how many times have we paid for repairs that were never necessary? How many times have we accepted canned explanations without realizing that much of the car's behavior depends on simple procedures that any driver can perform with calm and attention? If this knowledge awakens anything, it is the awareness that understanding your own vehicle is not just convenient, it's liberating. Because when you know what's happening behind every warning light, every strange failure, every unexpected behavior, you're no longer vulnerable. And in the end, maybe this is the greatest reset of all, the reset of the relationship between you and your car. A clearer, fairer relationship, and far less dependent on diagnostics that cost more than they should.